Okay, let's talk about castles. When you picture a medieval castle, what comes to mind? Probably grand stone walls, towering turrets, maybe a brave knight or a beautiful lady. But there's one thing movies and fairy tales almost never show you: how utterly, bone-chillingly cold these places were. I mean, seriously. A stone fortress built for defense isn't exactly optimized for cozy nights. So, how did anyone in a medieval castle, from the lord to the lowliest servant, manage to get any sleep without literally freezing to death? The answer is probably a lot weirder and a lot more communal than you'd ever imagine. Forget your modern ideas of personal space, central heating, and even your own bedroom. For most of medieval history, and honestly, for millennia before that, sleep was a team sport. We're talking about a time when a bed was often just a glorified pile of leaves, and human bodies were the best radiators you had. Imagine a cave filled with our ancestors, all huddled together, a symphony of snores, murmurs, and, well, other bodily noises. It was noisy, probably smelly, but crucially, it was warm and safe. And this wasn't just for our distant ancestors. This communal sleeping arrangement stuck around for a very, very long time. Even in the grand medieval castles we picture, beds as we know them were a luxury for the very few, and even then, they weren't necessarily for one person. For most of the household, including a surprising number of gentry, the Great Hall was where everyone crashed. Think about it: a massive, echoing stone room, usually with one or two roaring fireplaces that did little to warm the vast space. People would simply find a spot on the floor, wrap themselves in blankets or cloaks, and try to catch some Z's. If they were lucky, they'd have a sack stuffed with hay to use as a mattress. Yeah, hitting the hay literally meant hitting a pile of straw, not exactly a memory foam experience. But what about the lords and ladies, the folks living in those fancy rooms? Surely they had private warm beds, right? Well, yes and no. By the 15th century, affluent homes started to see beds with wooden frames, actual mattresses, still often straw or feathers, but a step up: sheets, blankets, and even pillows. But here's the kicker: they were huge. As historian Lucy Worsley points out, sleeping alone in one of these grand beds would have felt incredibly lonely. They were designed for multiple people. You see, a high-quality bed was often the most expensive item in the entire household. Most wealthy families could only afford one. This meant entire families, sometimes with their children, would pile into one massive bed, sharing the covers and, crucially, sharing their body heat. They weren't weirded out by this. In fact, for poorer families, the communal bed was a rare place for genuine family bonding. And it wasn't just family. Mistresses sometimes shared their beds with female servants. This wasn't just about warmth. It was also a way to protect them from the unwanted advances of male members of the household. And many servants, regardless of gender, often slept at the foot of their master's bed. Yes, even if other bedtime activities were happening in that very bed, privacy was a foreign concept. When you've got multiple people, or even strangers, sharing a bed, you've got to have rules, right? The British called it two pig, essentially assigning spots in the bed based on age and gender. Imagine trying to sleep next to a stranger, or your entire family, and having to follow unspoken rules about not hogging the blankets or lying still. It sounds like a recipe for a bad night's sleep, but it was just how things were. Historian A. Roger Eckerch even recounts a 19th century Irish family, where everyone slept in birth order, with the parents and sisters on one side, brothers on the other, and any odd guest or traveling peddler just squeezed in. This total lack of privacy extended beyond just sleeping. Most people in pre-industrial Europe and America did everything under the gaze of others: eating, working, even attending to personal matters, all in the presence of family, servants, and even farm animals. So, those rare private moments, they often happened in bed. It became a kind of neutral territory. Siblings would whisper secrets. Husbands and wives would have candid conversations. Eckerch suggests that for women, the bed was a place of rare autonomy in a patriarchal household, where they could voice concerns unsuitable for other times. Bed sharing also had its perks. It was an opportunity to bend social norms. Male servants sometimes engaged in sexual relations, and it wasn't uncommon for illegitimate babies to be conceived when male and female servants shared a bed. Even the strict hierarchy between mistresses and their female servants could soften and loosen when they were sharing the same covers. So, who finally decided to end this long-standing tradition of communal sleeping? The Victorians, of course. With their obsession with propriety and the rise of the Victorian home, a house with many distinct rooms and a clear separation between masters and servants, privacy became paramount. Individual bedrooms for each family member slowly became the norm, and the idea that communal sleeping was improper, even immoral, began to trickle down through society. This push for separate spheres even extended to married couples. Suddenly, it wasn't just about having your own room, but your own bed. This offered the appearance of decorum that Victorians craved, but there was an even bigger reason for the rise of his and her beds: disease. The mid-19th century was rife with anxieties about public health. People believed diseases spontaneously generated from foul water and air, and a sleeping body emitting all sorts of poisonous substances through its pores was considered a prime offender. Mrs. Elizabeth F. Holt, in her 1892 housekeeping guide, warned against the exceedingly impure air under bedclothes. And Dr. B.W. Richardson, writing in 1880, even cautioned against children sharing a bed with adults, fearing the aged would suck the vital warmth from the young. Not to mention, no one wanted to deal with heavy and disagreeable morning breath. Separate beds also empowered the new woman of the late 19th century. No longer content to be subservient, she sought autonomy within her marriage. Twin beds in the middle-class bedroom visually reflected this shift. As Hilary Hines notes, twin beds are visually equal to each other. They take up the same amount of space. This physical separation created a pause between the beds, implying a conscious negotiation or decision to move from one to the other, redrawing sexual boundaries and granting women a new form of agency. Twin marital beds had a good run, lasting well into the 1960s, with department stores like Sears still advertising them. But after World War II, with a greater emphasis on family togetherness and working wives returning home, the tide turned. Twin beds began to be seen as old-fashioned, prudish, and even unhealthy for a couple's intimacy. By the early 1972s, the consensus was clear: no self-respecting couple would willingly embrace twin beds. Fast forward to today, and ironically, recent research supports Dr. Richardson's old assertion: couples do often sleep better apart. In Canada, 30–40% of couples are embracing this idea. But the stigma of the twin bed remains strong. We're still fated to sleep alone, unless we're a couple. It just goes to show you, what's considered normal about sleep has changed drastically over the centuries. So the next time you snuggle into your own warm, private bed, remember the journey from a pile of leaves to crowded castle halls, to the very deliberate invention of private space and individual comfort. And maybe, just maybe, give a little nod to those medieval folks who just wanted to get through the night without turning into an ice cube. It wasn't about luxury. It was about survival.